What up guys, I got a fresh new vid for you. In this one I'm going to show you how to build a rustic modern shoe rack. The thing I dig about this the most is how the black paint created a visual separation from the other parts. The angles on the side really grabs your attention. The best part about this is you can build your own for less than $20. The only thing left is to show you how I made it. Let's do this. This doesn't always work, but there are times that I have some good luck with clamping the lumber together when I bring them home from the box store. Quite often I bring them in, throw them in the garage, and when I get ready to use them, they end up twisted and warped. If you experience that, try clamping them before you store them. It works for me at times. To get started on this, I need to cut down a few 2x4s, and when I'm using a circular saw, I like to try to cut efficiently. Now here I'll start with the longest piece first. After placing a mark on here, I'll then use the speed square as a guide as I cut through the 2x4s. I need 6 of these measured at the same length, so I clamp 3 2x4s together and make 2 passes. Now I'll make the rest of the cuts until I have all the parts I need. And I'll keep this one pretty simple since I'm using a circular saw. I need to rip this 2x4 in two, and to do it safely with a circular saw, I created a jig. Not only is this a safe way of ripping, but it allows you to do it fast while taking all the thinking out of this. There's a saying, if you need to do it more than once, make a jig. Now that I've figured out an angle that will look pretty good to the eye, I made another jig to allow me to speed up that process. After putting a miter on both ends of the 2x4, once it comes in contact with the 2x4, it overhangs. The only way around this is to trim it. So I'll use the same jig I made and adjust the fence on it and rip the 2x4. Here are the parts I've cut to now using just a circular saw. Now is the best time to sand, especially when everything is loose. I ended up sanding the parts 3 times. The first pass I used 80 grit, second pass 120 grit, and the final pass I used 220 grit. At this point I'm done with all the sanding and it's time to assemble the parts. Before I can do anything, I need to lay these parts out, make sure they're all lined up, place a few marks on them, and then I can get ready for the glue up. Initially I was planning to use dowels to join all the parts together, but you can use a number of options here. You can use biscuits, you can use dowels, you can use any construction screws or even pocket hole screws. Whichever makes sense, I don't think you can go wrong here. I'm using regular wood screws. As I shown, I've drilled the location for the screws and drilled those about halfway deep. Now I'll spread some wood glue on the side of it, line up the parts to the markings that I made, and drive in the screws. Now I'll repeat this over and over again until I get to the final board, and then I'll show you what I did there. The important thing here is to keep track of where you drilled the previous holes to avoid running into them. I used the speed square as a guide to sort of keep this straight while I insert the screws. To add the final part, one thing I wanted to do is to make sure no hardware is shown. In this case I use a dowel jig, but anything could absolutely work here. You can drive in a screw and plug the screw head with the appropriate dowel. Of course, that would be my suggestion if you don't have a dowel jig or you don't want to pick one up. With the holes drilled, I'll add some wood glue on the surface and down in the holes, and then add the dowels. Finally, I'll cap this off by adding the last piece of 2x4. I favorite one side of the 2x4 when I drill the first set of holes, but when I drill the second set of holes I use a different layout, which is likely stronger. For now, I'll place these in the clamp, tighten it up, and set it off to the side and allow the glue to set up. To attach the sides, I'll also use dowels. First thing I'll do here is line up the 2 parts, place a mark going across both of them, then I add a label to keep track of how things line up. And now I'll drill the holes. Since this is designed to hold shoes, I'm not going to go too crazy with how I add dowels in this, but of course you can beef this up by adding multiple dowels in here. While I use 1/2 inch dowels, 3/8 dowel will work just fine. Before I begin the assembly, it's probably the best time to clean up the glue. More often than not, I like to use a wet rag and clean up the glue squeeze out while the glue is wet. Now a sharp chisel can clean up the dried glue, which I do find relaxing, but there's no need to go through all that effort if you can clean it up while it's in liquid form. Getting dried glue in the cracks just add additional work. To this point, all the holes are drilled and everything has been dry fitted and it's ready to be finally assembled. This was quite challenging to clamp, but if there's a will, there's a way. After battling with clamping this thing together, I just said I'll forget it, let the glue dry up, and here I am putting in that work to remove this glue. I think I'll have my rag and bucket of water ready to go next time. I'll pass over this one more time to address the areas that were just glued. The plan here is to give this thing a two-tone look. And the first thing I want to do is paint the areas that I feel like needs to be painted black. Now I do feel one color would probably look just fine and look cool, but if I just touch it up with some accent pieces, I think that would give some depth to this. I was also planning on painting the sides black, but I decided, you know what, I'm gonna hold off on that. I think it's always easier just to add black paint later rather than to have to remove it if I do not like that look. To top this one off, I applied a 1 coat of medium walnut Danish oil. One of my favorite, a quick and simple rub-on finish. The feet is not included within the price, and the reason for that is these were salvaged from an audio receiver way back. I just had them laying around. I'll say these are optional, but should give you a visual on what it would look like if you add feet. It's just a matter of lining them up and installing them. I actually made this to store a few of my work boots, but when my daughter saw it, she wanted it. So there's that. We can say I'm back to square one. Or I may just convince her that I'll build something cooler. I don't know. Well, that is it for this one, my friends. I will catch you on the next one, and until then, if you ain't already, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and ring that bell so you get notified when I post a new video.